The question of whether African Muslims reached America before Columbus is a topic of considerable debate among historians. Various theories and historical accounts suggest the possibility of pre-Columbian contact, particularly involving Muslim sailors from West Africa and Islamic Spain. Historical accounts and theories. Abu Bakr II's expeditions. One prominent figure in this discussion is Abu Bakr II, the 14th century ruler of the Mali Empire. Some historians speculate that he led expeditions across the Atlantic, seeking new lands. While there is no definitive evidence confirming these journeys, the narrative remains a point of interest for those exploring early transatlantic connections. Al-Masudi's writings. The writings of Abul Hasan al-Masudi, a 10th century Muslim historian, are often cited as evidence of early Muslim exploration. He documented a journey across the ocean to a new land filled with riches, and his maps included uncharted territories across the Atlantic, which some interpret as representing the Americas. Columbus's observations. Columbus himself noted interactions with individuals he described as black Africans during his voyages. He recorded accounts from Native Americans about black traders who visited prior to his arrival, suggesting that there may have been earlier contacts between Africans and indigenous peoples in the Americas. Cultural and linguistic connections. Some researchers point to linguistic similarities between terms used by indigenous peoples in the Americas and Arabic words. For instance, the term guanan, which Columbus recorded as referring to gold, bears resemblance to the Mandinka word ganan. Additionally, names like Almami found in Honduras echo Arabic titles for religious leaders. Archaeological evidence. There are claims of archaeological findings that suggest Muslim presence in regions such as Brazil and Central America long before European contact. Some narratives describe advanced cities built by Mandinka explorers that were later observed by Spanish colonizers. While there is no consensus among historians regarding definitive evidence of African Muslims reaching America before Columbus, several accounts and theories suggest that such interactions may have occurred. The discussions around Abu Bakr II's expeditions, al-Masudi's writings, Columbus's observations, and potential cultural exchanges contribute to a complex narrative that challenges traditional views of pre-Columbian history. The claim that Muslims reached America before Columbus is a topic of considerable debate among historians, with various pieces of evidence and assertions put forth to support this idea. Here are the main points of evidence and arguments surrounding this claim. Historical claims and evidence. Early Muslim exploration. Some historians suggest that Muslim sailors may have reached the Americas as early as the 12th century. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan notably claimed that Muslim sailors arrived in 1178, citing Columbus' alleged mention of a mosque in Cuba as evidence. However, this assertion lacks substantial archaeological support, and many scholars dispute the interpretation of Columbus' writings as metaphorical rather than literal role of Muslims in European expeditions. There are claims that Muslims were integral to European explorations during the Age of Discovery. Estevanico, a Moroccan guide who arrived in Florida in 1527, is often cited as one of the first documented Muslims in America. This suggests that Muslims may have influenced early European expeditions to the continent. Presence of Muslims in the slave trade. A significant wave of Muslims came to America through the transatlantic slave trade, with estimates suggesting that 10% to 50% of enslaved Africans were Muslims. Despite the brutal conditions and forced conversions they faced, many preserved their Islamic practices. This historical presence is well documented through slave narratives and oral histories, cultural and linguistic links. Some proponents of the theory point to linguistic similarities between Native American languages and Arabic, as well as cultural practices that may reflect Islamic influences. For example, Columbus noted similarities in gold processing techniques between West Africans and Native Americans. Counterarguments: lack of archaeological evidence. Critics argue that there is no concrete archaeological evidence supporting pre-Columbian Muslim presence in America. No Islamic structures or artifacts have been found that predate Columbus' voyage's historical misinterpretations. Many historians assert that claims regarding pre-Columbian Muslim contact often stem from misinterpretations of historical texts, or are based on anecdotal evidence rather than rigorous historical analysis. The references made by figures like Erdogan are seen as lacking credible backing from established historical research. Claims lacking credibility. Scholars such as Ken Chitwood emphasize that while these claims are historically significant, they do not hold up under scrutiny due to a lack of verifiable evidence. They argue that such theories often overshadow the achievements and histories of indigenous peoples in the Americas. While there are claims, and some circumstantial evidence suggesting that Muslims may have reached America before Columbus, these assertions remain highly contested and lack definitive archaeological support. The historical narrative is complex, with significant contributions from enslaved Muslims in later periods being more widely recognized than any potential pre-Columbian contact. Christopher Columbus's references to Muslims in his journals and writings reveal a complex interplay of cultural perceptions and historical context. Columbus's references to Muslims' imagery and cultural comparisons. Columbus often used imagery associated with Muslims to describe the indigenous peoples he encountered. For instance, he referred to the weapons of the Taino people as alfanges, a term derived from Arabic that denotes a type of curved sword commonly used by Muslims in Iberia. This choice of words suggests that Columbus was drawing parallels between the indigenous peoples and the Muslim cultures he was familiar with. Descriptions of clothing. In his observations, Columbus noted that some indigenous women wore scarves that he likened to Moorish sashes, indicating a perceived connection between their attire and that of Muslim cultures. Such descriptions reflect how Columbus interpreted new experiences through the lens of his existing knowledge of Islamic culture. Historical context. The backdrop of Columbus's voyages was marked by significant tension between Christianity and Islam, particularly after the Reconquista, which culminated in 1492 with the expulsion of Muslims from Spain. This context influenced Columbus's worldview, as he was motivated in part by a desire to find trade routes that bypassed Muslim territories. Claims of earlier Muslim presence. There are claims, notably by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, that Columbus mentioned a mosque on a hill in Cuba, suggesting that Muslims may have reached the Americas before him. However, these assertions are controversial and lack substantial archaeological evidence. Scholars generally interpret such references metaphorically rather than as literal accounts of Islamic architecture in the Americas. Scholarly interpretations. Historians like Alan Mikhail argue that Columbus's mindset was shaped by a crusader mentality, viewing his encounters with indigenous peoples through an anti-Islamic lens. This perspective influenced how he described and understood the new cultures he encountered. Columbus's mentions of Muslims reflect both his personal experiences and broader historical narratives of conflict and cultural exchange between Christianity and Islam during his time. His writings serve as a window into how European explorers conceptualized new worlds through familiar cultural frameworks. Christopher Columbus's journals contain a controversial reference to a mosque, specifically mentioning a mosque on a hill in Cuba. This claim was notably highlighted by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who suggested that Columbus identified this mosque during his voyages. However, the exact details of this reference are debated among historians. Context of the mention: the assertion about the mosque comes from a diary entry attributed to Columbus, which Erdogan referenced during a conference. He claimed that Muslim sailors had reached America prior to Columbus, and that this mosque symbolized earlier Islamic presence in the Americas. Skepticism and interpretation. Many scholars interpret Columbus's mention of the mosque metaphorically rather than literally. They argue that he may have been describing a natural formation that resembled a mosque rather than indicating the existence of an actual Islamic structure in Cuba. No archaeological evidence has been found to support the presence of Islamic architecture in the Americas before Columbus's arrival. Historical background: the idea of Muslims reaching the Americas before Columbus is part of a broader narrative that includes claims about pre-Columbian transoceanic contact. While some researchers support this view, it remains controversial and lacks definitive proof. While Columbus did mention a mosque in his writings, the interpretation and significance of this reference are subjects of ongoing debate among historians. The term Guanan holds significant historical and cultural relevance in the context of Muslim presence in America, particularly regarding pre-Columbian interactions between West African Muslims and indigenous populations. Etymology and meaning: Guanan is derived from West African languages, specifically the Mandinka word for gold, Ganan. It is also etymologically linked to the Arabic word Gina, which translates to wealth. This connection highlights the cultural exchanges that existed between West African Muslims and the indigenous peoples of the Americas prior to European colonization. Historical context: Christopher Columbus documented his encounters with indigenous peoples who referred to a yellow metal called guanan, which was used in crafting spear tips. He noted that this metal was an alloy comprising significant amounts of gold, silver, and copper, specifically 56.25% gold, 18.75% silver, and 25% copper. This composition closely matched the metalwork practices of West African artisans, suggesting a direct link between African Muslim traders and the Americas. Cultural significance: the presence of guanan as a term in the Americas indicates not only trade but also the potential for earlier Muslim exploration and interaction with Native American societies. Some historians argue that these interactions included cultural exchanges, intermarriage, and shared knowledge systems. The existence of guanan in indigenous cultures may reflect a broader network of trade routes that connected Africa and the Americas long before Columbus's voyages. Archaeological evidence research has uncovered inscriptions and artifacts in various parts of North America that suggest a historical presence of West African Muslims. These findings include evidence of educational institutions established by these communities, indicating that they had a significant impact on early American society. The significance of Guanan extends beyond its literal meaning. It symbolizes a historical connection between West African Muslim societies and the indigenous peoples of the Americas, underscoring the complexities of pre-Columbian interactions and the rich tapestry of cultural exchanges that shaped early American history. Evidence of Muslim communities in the Americas before Columbus's arrival is a topic of ongoing research and debate. Several sources point to various forms of evidence that suggest the presence of Muslims and Africans in the Americas prior to 1492. Historical accounts and exploration. Al-Sharif al-Idrisi's reports, an Arab geographer from the 12th century, al-Idrisi, documented a voyage by North African seamen who reportedly reached the Americas. This suggests that Muslim navigators were capable of transatlantic exploration well before Columbus's observations. Christopher Columbus himself noted interactions with indigenous peoples who spoke of black Africans trading with them. He recorded seeing ships filled with Africans heading towards the Americas, indicating established trade routes and connections between West Africa and the New World cultural exchange. The term Guanan, which Columbus recorded as a local term for gold, is similar to the Mandinka word Ganan, highlighting potential cultural and economic exchanges between West African Muslims and Native Americans. Archaeological and linguistic evidence. Piri Reis map, the famous map created by the Ottoman admiral Piri Reis in 1513, includes depictions of parts of the Americas, suggesting that Muslim cartographers had knowledge of these lands prior to Columbus. Place names. Research indicates that numerous place names in North America have Islamic or Arabic roots. For instance, there are claims of 484 names in the U.S. and 81 in Canada derived from Arabic, which may reflect earlier Muslim influence or presence. Muslims in early America. Slave rebellions and presence. By the early 16th century, Muslims from West Africa were present in the New World as enslaved individuals. Historical records indicate that these Muslims were literate and played significant roles in early slave rebellions, such as the one in Hispaniola in 1522. Surviving accounts, figures like Mustafa Zamuri, an Arab Muslim who arrived in Florida as a slave, illustrate that Muslims were part of early American history. His journey across what is now the U.S. showcases the resilience and adaptability of Muslim individuals in a new environment. In summary, while definitive archaeological evidence remains limited, historical accounts, linguistic studies, and cultural exchanges suggest that Muslim communities may have been present in the Americas prior to Columbus's voyages, contributing to a complex narrative about early interactions between different cultures across the Atlantic. Historical records suggest that Muslim sailors may have reached the Americas as early as the 12th century, although definitive evidence remains sparse and often debated. Here are some key points regarding these claims. Al-Sharif al-Idrisi's accounts. Geographical exploration. Al-Sharif al-Idrisi, a prominent Arab geographer of the 12th century, reported on a journey by a group of North African seamen who sailed westward into the Atlantic Ocean from Lisbon. He described their expedition as an attempt to discover new lands, indicating that they encountered islands inhabited by indigenous peoples. Claims of early discoveries. Kashkash ibn Sa'id ibn Aswad. Some historical narratives suggest that Kashkash, a Muslim sailor from Andalusia, made a voyage across the Atlantic in 889 CE, returning with treasures. However, This account is often viewed skeptically by historians due to a lack of corroborating evidence. Turkish president's assertion. In 2015, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan claimed that Muslim sailors reached the Americas in 1178. He referenced Columbus's memoirs, which allegedly mention a mosque on a hill in Cuba. However, scholars dispute this claim, noting the absence of archaeological evidence supporting Muslim presence before Columbus. Cultural and linguistic evidence. Place names and trade. Some researchers have pointed to linguistic evidence and place names in the Americas that may reflect Arabic influence, suggesting prior contact between Muslim sailors and indigenous population. Skepticism and debate. While there are intriguing accounts and theories regarding Muslim exploration of the Americas, many historians remain cautious about these claims due to a lack of concrete archaeological evidence. The narratives surrounding these early voyages often blend historical fact with legend, making it challenging to draw definitive conclusions about the extent of Muslim presence in pre-Columbian America. Several primary sources and historical accounts suggest the possibility of Muslim sailors reaching the Americas in the 12th century. Here are the key records and claims. Al-Sharif al-Idrisi reports geographical accounts. Al-Sharif al-Idrisi, 1097 to 1155, an Arab geographer, documented a journey by North African seamen who sailed westward into the Atlantic Ocean from Lisbon. He described their expedition as an attempt to discover new lands, which some interpretations suggest could include parts of the Americas. His accounts indicate that these sailors encountered previously unknown territories, although the exact locations remain ambiguous and debated. Chinese historical texts. Mulan Pai references early Chinese texts, such as Ling Wai Dai Da, 1178, by Zhou Tsufei and Zhu Fanji, 1225, by Chao Jukua, mention a place called Mulan Pai. Some fringe theories propose that Mulan Pai could refer to regions in the Americas, although this interpretation is controversial and not widely accepted among historians. Kashkash ibn Sa'id ibn Aswad. Muslim historians' account. The historian Abu al-Hasan Ali al-Masudi, 871 to 957, recounts a story about Kashkash ibn Sa'id ibn Aswad, who allegedly sailed across the Atlantic in 889 CE and discovered a new land. This account is often viewed as anecdotal, with some scholars interpreting it as a fanciful tale rather than a factual record of exploration. Claims by Turkish President Erdogan. Modern assertions. In 2014, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan claimed that Muslim sailors arrived in America in 1178. He referenced Columbus's diary entry about a mosque on a hill in Cuba, although this claim lacks substantial evidence and is often considered metaphorical rather than literal. Contemporary interpretations. Some modern researchers argue for the plausibility of Muslim exploration based on navigational expertise and maritime capabilities of Muslim societies during this period. However, definitive archaeological evidence supporting these claims remains limited. In summary, while there are intriguing historical accounts and claims regarding Muslim sailors reaching the Americas in the 12th century, much of the evidence is circumstantial or speculative. The narratives often blend historical fact with legend, making it difficult to establish concrete conclusions about pre-Columbian Muslim presence in the Americas. The knowledge of prevailing winds and currents played a crucial role in the navigation strategies of Muslim sailors, potentially facilitating their journeys to the Americas before Columbus. Here are some key aspects of this maritime knowledge: understanding winds and currents. Trade winds. Sailors in the Islamic world, particularly those from North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, had extensive knowledge of trade winds that blew consistently across the Atlantic. These winds, which blow from east to west in the tropics, would have been essential for any westward voyages toward the Americas. Mastery of these winds allowed sailors to plan their routes effectively, maximizing their chances of successful navigation across vast oceanic distances. Navigational techniques. Muslim navigators utilized advanced techniques for reading the winds and currents, which were documented in various maritime texts. This included knowledge of seasonal wind patterns.